These are Joe Swanson's 10 worst moments ever. We begin with the episode Joe's Revenge, where Joe finally reveals how he ended up in a wheelchair after lying to his friends for so many years.
You always told us you fell off a roof during a fight with the Grinch.
I lied.
While hanging out at the Clam with Peter and Quagmire, Joe learns of the arrest of the notorious criminal, Bobby, the Shirt Briggs, the man allegedly responsible for putting him in a wheelchair. After a rather lengthy emotional display, he opens up to tell the truth. He tells his friends about his time as an undercover agent, tracking Bobby's heroin business. As an undercover agent, Joe gathered enough evidence to lock Briggs up, but he decided to spice it up a little by adding a taped confession. Unfortunately, Joe's a terrible actor, and he easily blows his cover.
Bobby Briggs, you're really good at heroin. How much heroin is here, Bobby Briggs?
Why are you talking like that? Are you wearing a wire?
One can only wonder if he was so clueless. How did he manage to stay undercover for that long? Following his terrible showing, a hardened criminal like Bobby wasn't going to let him off the hook.
Oh, you're dead, Joe Swanson.
If you think Briggs made a mistake with the name, you are wrong. Joe's undercover name is Joe Swanson. How daft can you be for your undercover name to be almost the same as your real name? It just shows he wasn't smart enough to come up with something original. Well, Joe somehow convinces Briggs not to kill him because he is a cop. But Briggs is not going to let Joe off without a souvenir.
Then get ready to spend the rest of your life as a lame gimp with an annoying-voiced wife.
Now, back to the present. Joe learns that Bobby has escaped police custody. Still holding a grudge against him, he takes it upon himself to seek out revenge.
Well, Chief, I'm here because I want you to put me on the Briggs case.
Absolutely not.
Come on, Chief! I know everything about Briggs. I'm the only one who can catch him.
No, Swanson, you're too close to the case.
With the police chief refusing to grant his request, Joe turns to his friends for help.
Joe, if they don't find this guy, it's gonna eat you alive for the rest of your life. You gotta take matters into your own hands. You gotta go after this guy.
So, the gang immediately set out on a mission to get Bobby Briggs. Their first stop is a strip club, where Quagmire gets a lap dance. Nah, don't be in such a rush to judge Quagmire. He uses his flirting skills to find out Bobby's address from the criminal's favorite stripper. Next, they track Bobby down to the address, but the criminal gets away.
He's gone, you guys! I had him! That was our one chance!
To further complicate things, they get arrested for interfering in a police investigation, but Joe isn't going to let anybody take his opportunity away from him. All thanks to Quagmire's penis, they escape.
The keys are in the ignition. Let's go!
I told you to search that guy's penis. You say that about everybody.
Don't ask how Quagmire did it. Away from Quagmire's incredibly efficient penis, Joe deciphers that Briggs is headed to El Paso, Mexico, and the gang hurriedly rushes off to the border to mount a roadblock hoping to catch Bobby. As predicted, Bobby shows up, and this time Joe isn't going to let him slip out of his grasp.
I've waited 15 years for this moment, Briggs.
Eventually, Joe shoots Briggs on the knees, hoping to cripple him. Instead, Bobby ends up dead. Joe might just be tougher than the so-called Bobby Briggs. Next, Brokeback Swanson. At the Drunken Clam, the guys learn of a bull run, but since Joe's handicapped, and according to Quagmire, he's dead weight, they decide to participate without telling him.
Can't do a bull run with a guy in a wheelchair.
Yeah, this is for athletes.
Athletes? When all I see is a bunch of lazy men suffering from a midlife crisis. As the guys get ready to head out for the bull run in matching outfits, Joe suddenly shows up to ask what they are up to. Since they didn't want Joe to know the truth, they come up with a lie. But Peter's lying game is pathetic.
We are competing in the International Chef Boy ID lookalike contest.
Oh, well, where's your chef hat? You guys are gonna lose.
Since Peter's lie fails to do the trick, Cleveland tells Joe the harsh truth.
Yeah, we thought it seemed too dangerous for, incapacitated half-man shrivel-legged gimps. And we didn't want to hurt your feelings.
Well, you did a great job trying not to hurt his feelings, Cleveland. Now, aware of where they are headed, Joe decides to tag along. And no, he isn't going to just be a spectator. Joe is going to participate in the bull run, which is just a recipe for disaster. As expected, the bull run is intense, perhaps way more intense than they would have wanted.
Cleveland, why do you let them talk you into these things? This is how people pleasers die!
Well, okay. At first, Joe appeared to be doing quite well until this happened.
Joe! Oh my God!
Maybe he should have just sat this one out. He didn't really need to prove his point.
I can't feel anything below my neck. I can't move a muscle, guys.
Oh my God! Joe's completely paralyzed!
Following his devastating accident, Joe ends up in the hospital. Dr. Hartman informs them that Joe's lost all movement and would require round-the-clock care. To make things even worse for Joe, Bonnie bails out on him.
I'm leaving Joe and moving to Europe. I didn't sign up for this.
With Bonnie no longer around, the responsibility of looking after Joe falls on his friends. And if we are being honest, they are not good at it.
So before we go, I'm gonna put the remote in your mouth. Here's a can of chili. And the opener we'll put in your mouth. And here's a magazine I thought you might like to read. I'm gonna put it in your mouth.
At least Peter's putting in some effort. Realizing that taking care of Joe is too much of a task for them, they decide to put him in a home, though not the kind of home you would expect.
Yeah, that's why I looked into it, and we've reserved a place for him at the State Home for Mentals and Bastards.
Oh my God, sometimes they whip them with hoses. Outside? This is perfect!
Oh man, Joe's friends really care about him, huh? So they check Joe into the home. But a few days later, feeling remorseful, they go back to get him out of the home, only to discover that the doctor made a mistake.
Yeah, it turns out Dr. Hartman's cell phone was pressing on my spinal cord, and that's what was causing my total paralysis.
That just shows how incompetent Dr. Hartman is. Such a clueless doctor. In Believe It or Not, Joe's walking on air. Joe accidentally eavesdrops on Bonnie's phone call with Lois, and what he hears leaves him heartbroken.
Oh, it's okay. I'm used to not dancing. I mean, I knew what to expect after, Joe's accident, and I'm prepared to live the rest of my life this way.
I don't think she meant to hurt Joe, but Joe wasn't supposed to hear that either. Well, finding out how Bonnie really feels hurts Joe's feelings.
Poor Bonnie. She deserves so much better than me. God, she must regret this marriage. If only there was some way for me to walk again.
Desperate to find a solution, Joe, accompanied by Peter, visits Dr. Hartman, who informs him about a highly experimental leg transplant procedure that could make him walk. Fortunately for Joe, the surgery is successful.
Gentlemen, I give you the new Joe Swanson.
I gotta admit, given Dr. Hartman's pedigree, I'm shocked he was able to pull that off. Now, with new legs, we begin to see a different side of Joe. Joe becomes an arrogant, show-off prick.
Oh, Joe, that was amazing.
I know. I was there.
After much-needed sex with Bonnie, Joe takes the guys mountain climbing, an exercise that revealed that all his friends are actually in poor physical shape.
Oh, this is great! I feel so alive! Come on, ladies, kick your high heels off and get moving! You guys are a disgrace!
Next, he takes them to karate lessons. Or rather, he just wanted to whoop their asses.
Joe, we don't even know what a dojo is.
There's no mercy in this dojo!
Joe, why don't you take it down a notch?
No mercy!
At this point, we can all agree that they prefer the crippled Joe better. This one's a jerk. While they struggle to keep up, Joe continues to push his friends until they are all tired of his behavior. Since they can't keep up with Joe's new energy, Joe decides to replace them with new friends.
Well, Peter, I realized over the last few days the only reason I hung out with you guys is that I was crippled and you were lazy.
That was fast. Joe's got no loyalty. Back at the Clam, Peter, Quagmire, and Cleveland begin interviewing candidates to become the new fourth guy in the group. Frustrated by their quest, Peter decides to talk to Joe, only to witness something shocking.
Joe, please, can't we talk about this?
There's nothing to talk about. I've outgrown you, Bonnie. I need to spread my legs and fly. Keep the kid.
Oh, shoot. I thought he wanted new legs so he could be the perfect husband to Bonnie. Meanwhile, frustrated by Joe's bad attitude, the boys decide to do something drastic.
Boys, there's only one answer. We gotta re-cripple Joe.
As agreed, they head over to Joe's house to break his legs, but they all end up getting their asses whooped. However, Bonnie, who was also fed up with her husband, decided to take matters into her own hands. After being shot several times by Bonnie while Struggling to hit the target, Joe decides to end the torture by himself.
Joe, I'm so sorry. I'm a terrible shot.
For God's sakes, just give me the gun! I'll do it myself!
Finally, Joe's back to the Joe everyone loves. The Joe who sits in a wheelchair and occasionally gets unnecessarily angry. In Ready, Willing, and Disabled, Lois organizes a charity car wash event to raise money for an organ transplant for one of Chris's classmates. During the event, a thief suddenly shows up to steal the money.
He's getting away!
Don't worry, you won't get far.
Joe, the cop, goes after the thief, and after an incredibly high-speed wheelchair chase, he recovers the money, except that the thief gets away. But instead of being excited that he got the money, Joe becomes mad at himself for letting the criminal escape.
Don't you understand? I lost the perp. I lost the perp!
While everyone's celebrating him for being a hero, Joe slips into depression, forcing Bonnie to reach out to Lois. Lois then asks Peter to go cheer up his friend, but Joe isn't ready to let it go.
Peter, the other day was the first time I've ever lost a perp. It was also the first time I've ever really felt handicapped. I've made up my mind about this. I'm quitting the force.
Peter, however, manages to convince Joe to take part in the Special People's Games. He even volunteered to be his coach.
Joe, look at me. Look at me. Do I have food in my teeth?
No.
Oh, great. Thank God. Now listen here, Joe. You and I both know you have what it takes to win this thing. So get out there and do it, huh?
I had no idea Peter could sound this intelligent. So, Joe nails the pole vault but stumbles in the high jump, hurting his already fragile confidence.
Peter, it's over.
Over? What are you talking about?
Well, if I couldn't catch a too-big criminal, how am I supposed to win a race?
Peter, however, isn't about to watch Joe throw away weeks of hard work. First, he delivers an exhausting but weirdly motivating speech. But still not convinced by Joe's abilities, Peter secretly adds steroids into Joe's water. Thanks to the steroids, Joe wins the race. Following his victory, Joe becomes an instant celebrity while Peter, his coach, is barely recognized.
I don't understand how he could do that without me. We were gonna do everything together.
Joe even has a movie made about his story to victory, except that they intentionally twist Peter's part of the story to make it look like Joe achieved it on his own.
Joe wouldn't be famous if it hadn't been for me.
More than just being jealous, Peter decides he too deserves some of the spotlight.
Mr. Tucker, I have just become handicapped like Joe Swanson, and I demand commercial endorsements and a TV movie based on me starring Valerie Bertinelli.
Crazy that he already had his preferred choice of actors. His movie request was obviously denied, but Peter wasn't done yet. If he wasn't going to get a share of the spotlight, he was going to humiliate Joe publicly. So at the event, to celebrate Joe's victory, he delivers a thank you speech that fails to acknowledge the efforts of his coach, and Peter couldn't take it anymore.
Excuse me, but there's someone else he didn't thank. Mr. Steroid. That's how he won.
That's not true!
Yes, it is. I put steroids in your water bottle right before the last race.
With that, Peter succeeds in humiliating Joe in public. In Papa Has a Rollin' Son, we see the guys hanging out at the Drunken Clam, talking about the upcoming Father's Day celebrations when Peter suddenly recalls that none of them has met Joe's dad. They quiz Joe about his dad, but Joe evades the question, opting to go get some more drinks. When Joe goes to get the drinks, Peter and the rest track down Joe's dad on the internet and invite him over to Quahog for Father's Day.
All right, great, but remember, this is a surprise for Joe.
Seconds later, Peter spills their little secret. But Joe isn't exactly excited about his surprise. It turns out that Joe's dad loves to make fun of handicapped people. Plus, he has no idea that his son is crippled, and Joe would prefer to keep it that way. Well, since Joe's dad is already on his way, they agree that the best thing to do would be to hide Joe's handicap.
All right, check it out, Barney. This is how we're gonna fool Joe's dad.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it looks real, right? I put this pair of pants on the front legs of this horse and simply hid the rest of the horse behind this curtain.
This is probably the dumbest idea I have ever seen. Can't believe Bonnie agreed to it. Since the whole thing was bound to fail from the start, the horse loses control until Peter is forced to put it down. This means they have to switch to plan B, but the new plan is even crazier.
Wait a minute. That's it. I will get in your shoes. I'll just pretend to be you. I mean, your dad ain't seen you in years. He won't know the difference.
Left with no other option, Joe agrees to Peter's plan and the makeover begins. Peter's plan works to perfection, as Joe's dad can't even tell who his son is. So much for being a father. With Peter now acting like Joe, Joe has to live in Peter's house.
Why is Mr. Swanson coming?
And why is he dressed like Dad?
I don't know, kids. I stopped asking after your father said he shot a horse.
Meanwhile, Peter and Bud are having an eventful father and son time together. On their return, they see Lois and the kids trying to squeeze Joe into a car, and Joe's dad decides it's the perfect time to make fun of yet another crippled man.
Oh, this'll be fun. Let's see how long it takes him to get Gumby over there into the car.
Obviously, forgetting his real identity, Peter, who we all know is a dumbass, joins in to take a swipe at his kids.
Yeah, he's a mess. Look at his ugly kids.
Pathetic.
Later on, Peter goes to inform Joe that there has been a change in plans.
Oh, that's the other good news. Bud's not leaving. I told him he can move in with me and Barney. What?
Peter, this is crazy.
Nah, it's gonna work out fine.
Such a selfish friend. The news upsets Joe, but Joe is too ashamed to do anything about it. Eventually, he becomes fed up with Peter's unnecessary display and confronts him. The two end up in a fight, and the handicapped man whoops Peter's ass. After witnessing their face-off, Joe's dad finally finds out the truth. He realizes that even though Joe is handicapped, it doesn't make him less of a man. In the episode #Jolo, while hanging out at the Clam, all four of them surprisingly agree that they would love to have pudding for breakfast. But what are the odds that four grown-up men would all want to have pudding at the same time? Weird, right? Quagmire blames their pudding craving on the new billboard they passed on their way to the Clam that morning. With that, the conversation gradually shifts from ordering pudding to the new billboard. Peter then suggests that they all go check it out. Grown-ups, getting excited over a billboard like preteens. Then, they drive to the billboard where they end up in an unnecessary argument.
Look, there's only one way to settle this. I am climbing that billboard to prove it's real pudding.
To prove his point, Peter climbs to the top of the billboard, but rather than pudding, he finds something else in the giant bowl. He finds a boy passed out inside the bowl. Turns out, Peter isn't the only one who wanted to confirm if they put real pudding on the billboard. But why would they? Well, Peter becomes an instant hero as Quahog citizens witness him rescue the boy.
Mikey, you're safe! Thank you so much for finding my boy!
Thank you for finding her boy. I'm the stepfather.
We probably should have cut that part out. Following Peter's heroics, the city honors him in an event that makes Joe jealous.
Wow. 20 years on the force and no one's ever clapped for me. Except for that one sarcastic gay guy.
After Peter's semi-inspiring speech, Joe decides to ask his celebrity friend a question.
Peter, that thing you said about not thinking and just doing stuff. Did you mean that?
Sure I did, Joe. I never stop to think. That's why I've had ringworm 11 times. I will roll in anything.
You know what? You're right.
Thinking that's the secret to being a hero, Joe decides he no longer wants to think about anything. His first move is to quit his job, quit his marriage, and then move out of his house. Worried about Joe, his friends go visiting him in his new apartment, where they find a pleasant surprise.
I've never been better. I was living my life all wrong, but not anymore. No more thinking, just living.
Next, Joe meets up with the guys at the Clam to invite them on a road trip to Niagara Falls. They all agree to the plan and immediately set out on the journey. But at the motel, Joe's new carefree attitude starts to become a concern for his friends.
You guys are lame. We're gonna go smoke something called croak.
God, what the hell has gotten into Joe?
The next day, they head out to Niagara Falls where Joe takes his absurdity to a whole new level.
Did I tell you guys it's the most magnificent place in the world and the greatest place to end it all? Goodbye, fellas.
Oh my God, Joe killed himself!
Looks like he did. Well, fortunately for Joe, he gets saved by a tree. We then get to finally find out why Joe has been acting strange all along.
Look, when I saw Peter become a hero, I guess it reminded me of all the things I can't do. I'm a cop who can't save anyone. I'm a husband in a legless marriage. My whole life is a joke.
So, Joe has been depressed all along, and he tricked his friends to accompany him to Niagara Falls so he could end it all. They try to cheer him up, but his mind is made up.
Joe, wait!
I stink at this.
Joe can't even successfully kill himself. He seems to be bad at everything. Since they no longer trust Joe, they tie him up. But Joe still tries again, only that his latest attempt endangers the life of all his friends, who almost end up drowning. Joe, however, rescues them, a gesture that opens his eyes. getting him his much-needed public applause. In the episode The Candidate, the guys meet up at the Clam to drink on a Saturday morning. Since they got in before daybreak, leaving becomes a little tricky, as the sun is now in its full glory, plus they are all drunk.
Now prepare yourselves, because the sun is never brighter than when you're day drinking.
Oh, I think I could handle it.
I'm sorry for reading people's mail.
Cleveland probably thought it was Judgment Day. As they step outside, they spot an app-controlled scooter, and Joe seizes the opportunity to start rambling about top-level military stuff.
Boy, if this is what we get, imagine what the military has.
What?
It's a perfectly reasonable comment. You know, the military had the internet way before we did. GPS, drones, you name it. Look around, guys.
After Joe's unnecessarily annoying interlude, the four of them get on the scooter for an exciting, unplanned adventure that takes them all the way down to the East Coast. Just take a look at how Joe's legs flap on the wind. Well, after hours on the scooter, they crash into a lake.
Oh, crap! An alligator! Oh, hey. Would you consider not eating us?
Yeah, maybe.
Oh, thank God.
I think maybe means no. He's just being polite. He's gonna eat us.
Fortunately, Mayor West comes to the rescue. Such a narrow escape. In their welcome back parade, which was more like a political gesture by the mayor for electoral points, Lois shows off her new wristwatch, which triggers Joe to resume his "What does the military have?" interlude.
We're surrounded by wonders. Look around and be amazed. That pad on your lap could buy a shirt at the Gap. But what does the military have?
Well, the military decides to show Joe exactly what they have by roasting him.
He was asking too many questions.
I'll be honest with you, that song was becoming really annoying. In the episode, Brian's Got a Brand New Bag, Peter develops an irritating obsession for kicking everyone and everything on his path after watching the Roadhouse movie he bought at a clearance sale.
Get off my plane!
It's not even the same.
Oh! What the hell? Not gonna talk to me like that in my bar!
Not a bar.
Oh, that's right. Cleveland moved.
Brian just had to be the one closest to the dummy, so Peter continues in his weird habit, even opting to drive with his feet, which results in an accident. That's when Joe steps in to restore order. Instead, he gets more than he could have bargained for.
Peter, we've had complaints from all over town. You're gonna have to stop with the kicking.
Oh, yeah? I think my scary, otherworldly, shadowy spirit friends might have something to say about that. Ghost.
Joe had no idea Peter now had some powerful new friends backing him. I'm burning down the Bayet. Quagmire suffers a gardening accident which lands him in the hospital, where the doctor recommends some antibiotics. To get the drugs, they head to the pharmacy where they get to listen to Mort complaining about his financial woes.
I used to, but it's all gone downhill since Muriel died. She could get away with overcharging people because they were always mentally undressing her.
Now, you wonder why she was so good at her job. With the pharmacy going down the drain, Peter and Quagmire decide to help him out.
This ain't so hard.
Well, you won't be much help if you keep chewing on the pills. After a series of marketing failures, they agree that to turn Mort's financial issues around, they needed to do something extreme. Their genius plan? Burn down the pharmacy so Mort can cash in on his insurance.
Okay, guys, listen up. This is a very flammable mixture that's also undetectable. If we put it on the electric box and two of the outlets, then light them all at once, it'll look like a short circuit.
Gotta give it to Mort. That's a pretty decent plan. For probably the first time ever, they execute the plan perfectly.
I'm sorry for your loss, but the good news is your insurance will be covering all of your damages.
But they weren't off the hook just yet. So even though the insurance company and the police called it an accident, Joe decided to be a little too nosy.
Hey, Joe, they said it was an accident. Roll away.
No, I'm just saying as your friend, I wouldn't feel right unless I left no stone unturned.
Who told Joe that Mort appreciates him digging into his business? Now, even more desperate to cover their tracks, they try all they can to distract Joe, but Joe's bent on finding out the truth. Ultimately, thanks to Peter's stupidity, Joe cracks the case.
You three are under arrest for burning down Goldman's pharmacy.
So, while in a cell, they try to justify their actions by accusing Joe of not understanding what it's like to be screwed over by an insurance company. Little did they know that Joe's had the worst of experiences with insurance companies.
Well, let me tell you a little story.
Joe sure loves to tell stories. This time, he tells them the story of how his insurance company single-handedly ruined his life.
Hello, I'm calling on behalf of your policyholder, Joe Swanson. He's badly injured his spine. Well, there's a new procedure that, if administered immediately, should restore his ability to walk. $200,000. We also have a wheelchair. $60.
They're going with B.
And that's the short but sad tale of how Joe's insurance company made sure he ended up in a wheelchair. Finally, we land at A Hero Sits Next Door, the episode where Joe tells the story of his experience with the Grinch. It's also Joe's first episode. So, Peter's trying hard not to meet with his new neighbors, which happens to be the Swansons, simply because he hates neighbors. Lois, like most women, is, however, really excited about the whole thing. In fact, while Peter is away at work, she begins to fraternize with the new neighbors. Eventually, Peter has no choice but to go say hello.
You must be Peter. Joe Swanson.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Phil. You know, you got a neighbor on the other side of your house, too, so, don't think you always have to bug me.
Well, that's a really friendly welcome. Anyway, Joe instantly rises to become quite the popular neighbor, even taking part in Peter's company's baseball game, where he becomes the star player. Meanwhile, after the team's victory, Joe throws a barbecue party in his yard, where Stewie gets a little too inquisitive. Although it's obvious that Joe doesn't speak toddler language, so he can't exactly understand what Stewie is saying, he gets the message loud and clear. And so in response to Stewie's question, Joe tells his neighbors a story.
About 10 years ago, I was investigating a robbery at an orphanage. It was Christmas Eve, and some presents had been stolen.
According to Joe, he finds the culprit, which happens to be the Grinch, on the roof of the orphanage. The Grinch attacks, but he manages to come out on top in the resulting brawl, except that the Grinch wasn't going to let the cop have the last laugh.
You think you have won, you think all is well, but kiss my green ass, I shall see you in hell.
If we go by what he said, that's how he lost his legs. The only problem is Joe has told so many versions of his how I lost my legs story, it's almost impossible to know which is true. But if you ask me, my money is on the Bobby Briggs story. So, that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Kindly like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon for more videos like this. See you soon.